Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the New York Gamer channel. We have a special episode. This week we're going to be talking about sort of a 7-month report card of the Xbox Series X. This console launched back on November 10th, 2020 with a lot of promise, along with its competitor, the PlayStation 5, which also launched in that time period. But on this episode, we're strictly going to focus on the Xbox Series X, not really as a comparison with the competitors, but just of the console itself. I won't get into the minutia of technical specs because at this point it's over a year old in terms of the specs of this console was revealed last spring. We've had this console for people that were lucky enough to get it, and we know the specs. This is more a buyer's perspective, months in, how I feel about the console, how I feel about my purchase, where do I think it's going, what do I like about it, and the things that I gripe about, complain about, and go after Microsoft for. So without further ado, let's get into the analysis of the Xbox Series X 7-month report card. When the Xbox Series X came out, it again was promoted with a lot of promise, the promise of power, real power. Microsoft was looking to change the narrative from its original Xbox One launch, its previous generation, which we've all talked about. It has been widely written about. It was a disaster when the Xbox One launched back in 2013. Marketing was bad. Marketing of the system, the price point. There was so many things wrong, and it was a very different business ethos that had become anti-consumer. Prior to that, the generation of the 360 was one of the most successful consoles that generation. It redefined console gaming. It defined online gaming. So Microsoft was riding high off the laurels of that. They were riding high off of the success of the 360 generation. So it created a very high arrogance when the Xbox One launched. Thank God for backlash and the recognition that this was a completely anti-consumerism move, policies of DRM, all these kind of restrictions. Fast forward and put us in Phil Spencer. With that has come a rebranding and a shift towards highly consumer-friendly policies. And we've seen that over the last 5+ years now. All building to this point where the Series X launched. This was a transparent process that started with Microsoft, Xbox specifically, giving early dev kits to Digital Foundry to break apart the console architecture last year. So there was a full analysis of the architecture and specs back then. So consumers were already seeing experts in the field get to analyze a console that had yet to come out, check it out, write about it, so potential buyers would know what they're getting if they purchase. Fast forward, November of 2020, the console launches, sells out immediately, along with its competitor, which was also selling out immediately. And almost 7 months later, this console is still selling out. The moment it is in stock, it's selling out. So it's still flying off the shelves. It's going to be probably Microsoft's most successful console. I have a feeling it will surpass the 360 eventually. And having said that, how does a buyer who purchased this console feel right now at this point? So I'm going to go over the pros of the console, and I'll actually finish with the cons that I feel. And I think it's pretty obvious of what everyone knows the cons are. When I first purchased the console, I booted it up. The first thing I recognized and really enjoyed was the design. I would say it's a mixed bag of reactions for the Series X design for people who have actually purchased it. There are people who absolutely love the design. It's modern, it's sleek, it's edgy, it's powerful, it's also extremely simplistic. But there's a beauty in the simplicity of it. And unlike its competitor, it could fit in most people's apartments or houses. That's a huge plus nowadays. So it's ergonomic in that sense. It's not big, despite all these spoofs and parody pictures that have been online showing refrigerators, and Microsoft had fun with it and poked fun at themselves. It's really small and compact when you're comparing it to its competitor. Maybe if its competitor, the PlayStation 5, had never come out, then this would look like a large console, but it does dwarf in comparison to its current competitor console. I did like the design. I enjoyed the design. I love the quietness of a console. You really appreciate the heat output and sound a console gives when playing it in a small room. I've played previous consoles. Even the Xbox One used to output, the original base model used to output louder and hotter. It seems once Xbox started designing the Xbox One S and One X, the console design became superb, and they outpaced their competitors when it comes to console design. They have perfected making compact consoles that deliver amazing performance with very little heat output and very little sound. And that's something I value as a gamer. I don't enjoy playing consoles that output a lot of heat up an entire room, but also sound like a jet engine taking off. And unfortunately, the competitor still hasn't mastered that as of yet. But there could be future updates that correct that. But as of now, the heat output is higher than the current Series X for certain titles. When it comes to the console's UI, there wasn't a big change from the Xbox One generation. But I think that allowed Microsoft to reduce the amount of bugs that the console had. Because I could say months in, there is very few bugs I've had with the Xbox Series X. And for all early console adopters, you know that's a huge thing where both companies, notorious in terms of when a new console comes out, you will not get a perfected UI and minimal bug experience probably till a few years into that console's lifespan. With the Series X, I got that within the first month of purchasing it. Granted, I didn't purchase it in November. It was months later. But I still purchased it within the launch window. And there have been several major updates since that launch date last fall. And the UI experience has been seamless. The UI currently projects in 1080p, unlike the competitor that projects in 4K. Microsoft has promised that the UI display will eventually get an update to display in 4K. Has this been a drawback? Not really. I care more about games projecting in 4K than I do the main menu. But having said that, it would be nice to just have everything in 4K. So I do look forward to that update. What attracted me to purchasing the Series X over its competitor, the PlayStation 5, was really the price point value proposition. And I say that because I am a retro gamer. I do enjoy companies that offer backwards compatibility. And I generally enjoy companies that are pro-consumer. And as I said, last generation, Xbox was not pro-consumer for the first half of its generation. Once Phil Spencer took off and took over as the head of Xbox, that's when the changes and policies were starting to be implemented and put in place to change the optics of the company and the way they do business. Fast forward to 2021, we are seeing the fruits of that labor come to life. And pro-consumer to me is offering a console where you could play 4 generations of titles under one hood. I keep emphasizing this, and I'm sure people gag when I say this, but to me, that's one of the most amazing features. A console that not only is the most powerful, and we have yet to even see that power, but you're offering 4 generations of titles. Now, even if I could care less about the original Xbox and its games, there are a lot of people that do. I started liking Xbox in the 360 generation, and there were a ton of amazing titles in that generation. The fact that I could play all these generations of games with enhancements, increased pixel count, draw distance, features like auto HDR, features like FPS boost, You're taking these games and trying to give them a facelift, even if the companies that made those games won't themselves. Microsoft's Xbox Series X will give those games a facelift for titles that may have otherwise not saw the light of day in terms of a facelift. Titles from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So to see these titles now with new color and vibrancy with Auto HDR, to see them run in a fluidity with FPS boost, it's something amazing that in itself would have been enough to justify my purchase, let alone the feature of Quick Resume. Quick Resume is a wonderful feature that it's been much talked about already, but it's actually going to be getting an update very soon, and it already got an update for the preview, people in the Xbox preview program. But for all the Xbox gamers, Quick Resume is about to get a great new feature where not only is it going to work even better, it's going to show you which games are in their suspended state. So just very quickly, this is a feature that allows you to, for instance, right now I'm playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I pop that in, play it, take out the disc, put in Resident Evil Village. Pop that in, play it, take it out, now put in a third title. When I take out that disc, when I stop playing wherever I'm at in Mass Effect or in Resident Evil Village, or in that third Xbox Series X title or Xbox One title or previous, the next time I put that game back in, it will literally start me back at the exact same point with no loading, instantly, not going through any loading menus, not going through any main menus of the game, just instantly back to that very part in the game. Even if it's in the middle of a conversation with an NPC in the game, it just shoots me back there. And then I could take that out, put back in Resident Evil Village, and I'm right back in the middle of a boss fight that I left 2 weeks ago. I'm right back into it instantly. I could unplug the console and plug it back in, and it still remembers and saves that Quick Resume state. I think that's one of the new kind of fantastic features of Next Gen. The thing with Next Gen, me and friends always talk about is we expected a huge visual update, a huge graphic update like we saw from the PS2 generation to the 360 generation, where we went from pre-HD to HD. I'm starting to realize now, at least for the beginning of this generation, it's little things like Quick Resume, Auto HDR, FPS boost, 4K 60, VRR, 120 frames. It's features like this, technological features like this, that wasn't possible 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So we have to accept these are next-gen features. They're also next-gen luxuries. I'm getting very used to just having this console for a couple of months, the idea of almost zero loading times. I'm not having any loading times anymore for a lot of titles, especially older titles. There's no more bathroom breaks. Now you just have to hit pause. If you're an older gamer, bathroom breaks were when the game was loading, when you had to enter a room, when you had to go in an elevator in a game, when you had to transition from a CG scene. Those were the loading times we were used to in previous generations. Not anymore. This next gen is really about powering and speeding up the experience. I've discussed the console's UI. It's fast. It's 1080p projected. Again, there'll be an update for 4K. It's very similar to the previous Xbox console generation with the addition of dynamic backgrounds and little things here and there. The main thing with the UI is it just works. It's simplistic. It's straightforward. It's not overly cumbersome. And that's because they've continued the design from the previous generation. So it's had multiple years to be perfected rather than creating a new UI from scratch. And then you have to go through all the aches and pains of getting early builds of it until it's finally or hopefully perfected. But that doesn't usually come till the end of that console's lifespan. With the Series X, we got to start with a already close to perfected UI from the previous Xbox generation. Aside from the amazing features, kind of just little spec features, the realization that I am now playing games in 4K 60 frames is wonderful. That was something that was promised on the Xbox One X, but we rarely got. With the Xbox Series X, I'm getting that. I'm currently playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition in 4K 60 frames with the option to play it in 120 frames at 1440p resolution. But it's wonderful options like that that really enhance my excitement for these new titles. Playing in 4K 60 frames seems like a superficial number, but it's actually a gorgeous number, and it's my new favorite number. Just like 1080p 10 years ago was my favorite number, and we were still getting few games 10 years ago that were reaching 1080p 60 frames. It's the realization that little details that you never noticed in previous generations, you're seeing now, and it makes the game so much more enjoyable, whether it's the armor on a character, whether it's the skin tone of a character, it's the blemishes of a character. It's the detail of a castle wall or castle steps or grass in a field. That 4K resolution coupled with the 60 frames is making these gaming worlds more beautiful. And it doesn't have to be photorealism graphics. It could be the most beautiful. It could be Ori and the Blind Wisps. Whatever the art style of the game, having that 4K 60 allows you to enjoy that world so much more, at least for me. The Xbox Series X allows that. With that, I think Xbox's mantra has been so much different than its competitor. And again, this is another pro, but Game Pass Ultimate. Game Pass Ultimate has been, to me, it's really been a mantra about creating this ecosystem that we want people to experience their next favorite titles, and then maybe they could purchase them. And we'll give them the option to purchase it at a discount if you enjoyed it, digitally, of course. But Game Pass Ultimate offers you 150 plus titles, coupled with EA Play. It's a value proposition that I think is extremely, extremely enticing. I personally prefer physical copy games. So I will always purchase physical copy games. But I am not above playing Game Pass titles, because if I like the titles in Game Pass, I will purchase them. I absolutely will, because that's who I am. I'm a collector, and I like to have the physical copies of titles. Having said that, I don't have the money to experiment purchasing tons of different titles. I'm not sure if they're good. That's where Game Pass comes in. Game Pass allows me to see these titles that may be cult favorites but have reviewed poorly, or may have reviewed highly, but when I play it, to me it's garbage. Game Pass allows me to save my money, believe it or not, because I get to pick and choose which titles I'm going to buy. Prior to Game Pass, I would have to hope on a demo to be released from the developer on either the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store. And if a demo didn't come out, I would have to go by word of mouth, back when I had more friends who were playing games. That has since limited. So Game Pass is allowing me to, at least for multi-plat titles and just Xbox exclusives, to pick and choose what I'm going to play. I'll play it on Game Pass. If I really like it, I am still purchasing that title, not digitally with the discount offered through Game Pass, but still physically, because that is just my choice. But Game Pass coupled with EA Play has just been an amazing value proposition. And it speaks for itself. Sales are through the charts for Game Pass Ultimate memberships. And I think it's a wonderful feature of the Xbox Series X, Series S, and all the previous Xbox consoles, as well as Xbox PC people. So Xbox is not limiting itself to just one console or one console generation. They are trying to create an ecosystem, unlike its competitor, where it's very accessible to meet you where you're at, whether that's on PC, old generation, current generation, or even mobile, with the power of xCloud, which comes with your Game Pass Ultimate. And for those of us who have iOS, xCloud is coming, and I am super excited to be playing that, because it would be wonderful to play my games on the go, depending on your broadband connections or Wi-Fi. It'll be wonderful to play these titles on different devices, so you're not restricted to one device. If you're on the go, if you're at a friend's house, you don't have to lug your console over, which I don't think anyone does anymore. No judgments. That's wonderful if you do. But they're about meeting you where you're at. And again, this is all possible because of the success of the Xbox sales, where the company has gone since it went back to being pro-consumer and not anti-consumer, and this is what I get to enjoy as an Xbox Series X owner. Personally, not limited to a Series X owner, just for me. I love that the system just runs quiet and cool. Range of services that Xbox Division offers remains an unbelievable value proposition. The OS is surprisingly bug-free too, the result of Microsoft deciding to iterate upon the Xbox One system rather than overhaul it for a new generation. I do have to say one last pro about the console, the controller. The controller is fantastic. You still can't beat this controller. It is the most comfortable controller for me. The input latency has been greatly reduced thanks to Microsoft's technological innovations with this controller. But what's also wonderful is, again, I talk about accessibility. Microsoft is still allowing you to use previous console controllers for the Series X and Series S. They're allowing you to use old controllers to play this console. They want to meet you where you're at. So if you're a next-gen adopter, which is now current gen, but you didn't want to buy extra Series X controllers or Series S controllers, you could use your Xbox One controller. That's fine. You could also use these controllers to play on PC. You could also use your mouse and keyboard to play on the Series X and Series S and Xbox One X. So it's giving consumers that choice that makes me appreciate it. Even if I'm not taking advantage of that particular or specific choice, I like that I have that option. I like that Microsoft allows me to buy external hard drives to hook up and play games off that external hard drive. That's a big difference from its competitor. Originally, you couldn't do even an external hard drive with its competitor's current console. Now you can, but the company still won't allow you to play games off those external hard drives. Microsoft will. It's this kind of pro-consumer accessibility options that make Microsoft have this kind of winning formula of positivity and accessibility for gamers to meet them where they're at, with their console, with their controller, with their price point, with their space, and everything else. Now, if that sounded like 20 plus minutes of a love fest of the Series X, this is where we'll switch gears now. I'll switch gears because Microsoft seemingly has all these right things going for it with console. The design, the build quality, the features, the backward compatibility, the digital subscriptions of Game Pass, EA Play, the features of xCloud. All that stuff is wonderful. But when it comes to exclusive blockbuster titles, Microsoft still just doesn't have it yet. 7 months in, and there's still yet to be a true AAA exclusive title that's stunning. It just hasn't. Now, I've played exclusive titles so far for the Series X, a few minor ones here and there, the medium, certain titles like that in that kind of level. I wouldn't call it AAA. I would say they were good titles, but they weren't a Returnal that PlayStation 5 is currently enjoying. They weren't a Spider-Man Miles Morales that I call a DLC, but still looks like a great game. I would say that, not that the competitor has a huge amount, by any means it doesn't, but Microsoft should have been more prepared. And I hate to give COVID the reason that both companies are lacking, but Microsoft more. COVID may have affected it, but Microsoft's always had this stigma for the last couple of years. In the 360 generation, it didn't have this. In the Xbox One generation, it started becoming more apparent that aside from the Forza series, the Gears series, and the Halo series, and probably leaving one out, it wasn't the same kind of bangers that the PlayStation 4 generation was putting out. And notably so, PlayStation 4 put out a slew of wonderful AAA exclusives. In that time, Microsoft spent the second half of the last generation acquiring a lot of companies and building for the future. And then just recently, in the last year, Microsoft had the major ZeniMax acquisition, which now adds a roster of a slew of studios that Microsoft now has in its control and coffers to make exclusives for the next 10 years if they wanted to. So they have the resources. They have the things in place. We just are at a point now we need the games to drop. It's 7 months in. This console is begging to have a game run it warm and fast and utilize all the specs and AMD chipsets that it has inside it. And as of now, we're relying on multi-plat titles that are stunning looking, such as Resident Evil Village, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But we need exclusive titles from Xbox that will show off this console's power and what it was promoted to be last fall and prior, when developers were dissecting every part of it. That's where this console is failing right now. And when I say failing, yes, it is failing in this aspect. Games, games, games. PlayStation 4 showed that games matter. And pro-consumerism matters as well. If I had to rate the 7-month report card, because a lot of people do the 6-month, if I had to rate the 7-month report card of the Series X right now, I would give it a B. Not a B minus, not a B plus, a solid B. The reason it's a B is because it has so many wonderful pro-consumer features going for it. And again, I've listed all of them, but specs, features, backwards compatibility, digital subscriptions, the games will propel it to an A or higher once they are actually here. And there are games coming. We have a Perfect Dark reboot coming. Chorus is coming this year, which is a Star Wars-ish looking something. We have Fable. We have Microsoft Flight Simulator, Hellblade, Halo Infinite, Stalker 2, much anticipated Starfield. And that's just to name a few. There are titles coming. We just need them yesterday. So just to say titles are coming doesn't change the fact that there aren't titles right now. I personally have enjoyed playing all the old backward compatibility titles and seeing them prettier than I've ever seen them before. But that's also not the same as playing a brand spanking new next-gen title. That's what I want to see. That's what most Xbox console adopters want to see. And that's what we feel like we're lacking. So, if you liked what you heard, if you have disagreements, if you believe the score is too low, if you believe the score is too high, reach out. Comment, like, subscribe so I could keep making interesting content. Comment, like, and subscribe so I could keep bringing up topics that maybe don't get discussed enough or maybe get discussed but in a different light. It's all about a diversity of opinion, a diversity of ideas, and also a diversity in comments so we can have a healthy discourse on just the state of gaming. Because gaming, I don't like to take it too serious. Gaming is not health. It's not the state of the world. It's just a wonderful hobby and pastime that I've been enjoying for 30 plus years. And I want to carry that passion and pastime and talk about it. The way people talk shop about baseball and talk about politics, I would like to talk about gaming with the same energy and enthusiasticness with all of you. So please comment, like, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy the gaming. Peace.